2020 Cybersecurity Threats and Trends. Before we get started, just wanted to go over a couple quick announcements for today's presentation. All phones have been placed on mute for the duration of this webinar. Should you have any questions, please put them in the questions tab, and we'll get to them as time permits at the end or follow up with you afterwards. If you are attending this webinar for CPE credit, you will need to answer the polling questions that come up throughout the webinar. So you will see those pop up at various times. So please be sure to participate in those if you're attending for CPE credit. At this point, I'd like to hand it over to Jeff Ziplo to begin today's presentation.
Thank you, Jared. So we wanted to share with you what we're seeing in 2020 as it relates to cybersecurity. So the agenda that you see in front of you is really to talk about, teleworkers and remote workers. Certainly have a discussion on ransomware and the Internet of Things. Just to share with you who the presenters are. On the next slide is two people that I work with and have been working with for the better part of a year. The first person, Heather Beerfield, she's been with Blum for going on a year now, but she has over 15 years of experience managing risk and building information security management programs. She's an awesome expert, if you will, as it relates to cybersecurity, and takes a very pragmatic approach to cybersecurity. David Sun, another one of my partners, has over 20 years of experience, and David has really worked in the cyber area for over 20 years and has delivered expert services to clients as it relates to data and system security. He does an awesome job as it relates to cyber forensic response and post-breach remediation. He has done a lot of testifying as an expert in both federal and state court in the areas of computer forensics and cybersecurity. And last on the list, my name is Jeff Ziplo. I've been with Blum for over 25 years. I do a lot of work in the cybersecurity. I would say I spend probably 70% of my time working with clients as it relates to cyber. We also, when I say we, both David, myself, and Heather, work with a number of different attorney general offices, not only in Connecticut, but out of the state, to provide them with breach information, provide a level of education, and really talk about how we can do our best to mitigate risk with some of the breaches that have occurred. So what I'd like to do is move on to our first area, which I wanted to talk about, which is the teleworker threat. And before we go into any more detail, I thought it would be interesting to share some 2020 cyber facts with everyone, because it's really bad out there. It is the wild, wild west. We have seen significant change in 2020. I think certainly because of a number of new types of attacks. So what we've seen is that every 39 seconds or so, there is an attack. Most of the time, it's phishing, but nonetheless, there are attacks going on all the time. And to be quite frank, and looking at all the emails I received yesterday, I probably received no less than 10 different phishing emails that were asking me to click on a link. And I know David is going to get into more details on that and some of the concerns and issues with that. But 43% of the cyber attacks have been targeting small business. And what we've seen is that represents a 424% increase of new cyber breaches, particularly associated with small business from last year. Since COVID-19, the FBI has reported a 300% increase in cyber crimes. We certainly know that 95% of the cybersecurity breaches are due to human error. And one of the things that we may not have a chance to get into is, a cybersecurity incident response plan and the importance of one. But one of the things that we've seen is that 77% of the organizations do not have any type of cybersecurity incident response plan. So with that, moving to the next slide, I do want to talk more about telecommuting, and the use of and working with uh, uh, re working remotely from home. There is no doubt in my mind that, um, due to COVID, we're going to see telecommuting for a long while, even after the pandemic. I think one of the things we have learned is that we can work at home, and we can work effectively and successfully. We just also need to make sure that we're doing it in a very secure way. So on the next slide, we all can recognize that COVID-19, really quickly forced, many companies and organizations into teleworking and working from home. I think that the key piece here is, we now need to take a look back and see how are people working at home, what are the risks of working at home, and how can we implement a more secure environment for the teleworker. So let's talk about, and on the next slide, the life work separation. And one of the things I wanted to share with you on the next slide actually is, believe it or not, um, protecting our networks has changed. And what I mean by that is, prior to COVID, companies and organization needed to protect their infrastructure, their internal network. It would include, if you had multiple offices, it would include, those remote buildings and such. But, we had a pretty clear idea of the physical locations that we needed to protect. Things have changed significantly, and I would submit that, IT organizations are now having to learn how to protect, not only the internal network of the company, but we also need to be considering, the employees' network, and every employee, for the most part, who's teleworking, has their own network. It has its own security challenges. And the diagram in front of you represents that we've really exponentially grown the network that we need to secure. And homes, depending on how you implemented, security within the home, really helps to identify, are you protected or are you not protected? And so this, having a secure network at home is really important to protecting, you as an individual, but also the data, that you have access to. So moving on to the next slide, I think one of the things I wanted to share with you is, and we saw it because of the quick switch from having to be in the office to going to home. It is not a good idea to use your home PC as the avenue to connect up to your network. Um, One of the concerns that we have, or some of the concerns that we have, is that you may not have the appropriate virus protection software. Your PC at home might already be infected, or it's not fully patched. And so we certainly highly recommend, that companies, provide their teleworkers with a secure, um, computer, laptop, notebook, Surface Pro, whatever it is, to at least provide some good, security practices and protocols and policies that are set up on the computer, so that, we can help to ensure security on that computer. One of the things I've told a number of clients that I work with is, I'm not sure why a company would want to buy a desktop computer anymore. I would firmly believe that, we probably want to be investing in laptop or notebook computers for the very near future anyway, if not, long term, because these are the types of devices that allow the teleworkers to work securely at home. One of the other pieces that I think is important to understand is, where are we storing, data? Where is that company data being stored? And one of the concerns I have is that people are using their computer, their home computer, either through the company or their actual home computer, and they're storing company information on it. And that is a big time no-no. I think we need to put in place some good protocols to suggest and to some extent force people to not store any information uh, on their company computer at home or their home computer, and that all the information should remain on the company site, on the company servers, or in the cloud using various cloud vendors, so that if there is an issue at home on our home network, um, we don't have to worry about any confidential information that might exist there. If you go to the next slide, you'll see that there's some things that we can do on our home internet connection to enhance security. Um, One of the most important things is making sure that you change the standard security user ID and password settings on a router. Many times they come with a default standard. Those default standards are well known. A number of years ago, if you bought a Linksys um, uh, router, you would know that user ID is admin and the password was password. And there are some standards out there. So it's really important to change whatever security standards come with the router device or your Wi-Fi device, and make sure that it is something that is known only by you, and is particularly from a password perspective, the longer the better. And I certainly recommend it be fairly long. We want to make sure that when you're dealing with Wi-Fi, that you're using security, a WPA 2 or 3 security, which is really important because that will help secure that password. On the next slide, I just wanted to highlight some social engineering things that we have been seeing. What would happen if someone from your company's IT department called you for credentials? What would you do? Or someone who said they were part of your IT department called for credentials, would you give it out? If your CEO or HR person asked for W-2 information, would you give that information out? If you received a text on your phone, would you select the link? And hopefully the answers to all these questions are no, no, and no. We should never be giving out credentials to anyone, no matter who they are. Do never give out your credentials. If someone is asking for, and I use the example here of W-2 information, we're getting into that W-2 season, but if someone's asking for W-2 information, I would certainly tell them, let me check and I'll get back to you. And many times that will take care of the issue. And then lastly, we've seen a big increase of security issues with people just clicking on text that they thought they got from a friend, but it's a bad link. And unfortunately, we can download some software that could put your phone at risk. So just food for thought there. Moving on to the next slide, just some password best practices. I mentioned the longer the better. If you look at where we are when you have a password of 12 characters, it's going to take a long time, over 7 million years, for someone to crack it. So I certainly recommend to people two things. One, that they use, 10 to 12 characters in their passwords, and they also use a passphrase, not a word in the dictionary, but a concatenation, if you will, of a term that you like. I put here, I love the New England Patriots 2020. By the way, that is not my password. That's only an example of one. Um, Moving on to the next slide. Um, we should all be using virtual private networks. That is something that will create what we call a secure tunnel between your office and the company. And having that in place will certainly protect the security of your home network and the company network as well. On the next slide, multi-factor authentication, MFA, and it's something something that you have. So something is a user ID and password. I know my ID, I know my password, but then it's something that you have, and that something you have, you'll see up in the upper right-hand corner, is it's an RSA device. It actually provides a secure number, and it changes, I believe, every 30 seconds, and you need to use that number to add this next level of authentication. You might receive an app, and on the bottom of the screen over on the right hand side, this app will come up on your phone and say, do you want to approve the sign? And that's the something that you have piece. And we certainly suggest the app approach, because it's something that is easily implementable, and something that you have that if you don't have your cell phone, you won't be able to get into the application or into the network. I'm going to jump to the next screen, which is challenge questions. All the questions that you see on this page, we can get all of them from social media. Your pet's name, your high school, your favorite movie, typically that's all available. These challenge questions are a way, or challenge or security questions, however you want to look at them. I certainly recommend that people consider using a term that has nothing to do with any one of these questions. And so I put here blue jumping jacks. You could answer the same question with blue jumping jacks, but my point to you is be careful on how you answer these questions, because it is something that we need to be thinking about. Patching your employees is really another area that we need to be thinking about. As I mentioned before, um, many of the data breaches are a result of employees' cyber hygiene, and they can be your best asset, or they can be a big liability. So on the next slide, what we try to do is highlight, what the employee's role is in enhancing security. They are your first line of defense. They can identify when something doesn't seem or smell right, and provide an escalated an incident very quickly to the IT department to say something doesn't make sense here. We need to provide them with security awareness training. We need to get them into better habits about not clicking on bad emails. It's stop, think, and then click, and understand when something doesn't look right. On the next slide, I tried to provide, just some general information about phishing your employees. And I do believe that we want to phish our employees, because it'll give them a sense to stop and look at and understand an email before we respond. And as long as they take an extra couple of seconds before they respond, I think it's really important. I mentioned earlier that I got a number of phishing emails just the other day, and I just needed to take a moment to say, does it look right? And in these instances, it didn't look right, and in fact, I was correct. They were bad emails. The last item is really just teleworking tips. Make sure that you really have some good standard policies and procedures for working securely at home, enhancing and making sure that your employees recognize the security needs and requirements of working at home. Again, making sure they have the proper equipment, i.e. a company computer, so that we can help to ensure that it's configured in a very secure manner and we can mitigate a number of risks. And it's always a good idea to check in and make sure that with our employees who are teleworking, that if they have any questions, if they have any concerns about security, that they are in a position to reach out to IT department and go from there. Go
All
ahead,
right.
Chair.
So yeah, we've got our first polling question here. Again, if you are attending for CPE credit, the polling questions are required here. So we'll leave this open for just a minute or so here so everyone can get their responses in. Keep it open for just another few seconds here, and then we'll move along. Great, thank you, everybody.
So I wanted to turn it over to Davidson to give us a better understanding of what's going on with ransomware. Go ahead, David.
Thank you, Jeff, and good morning, everybody. So ransomware, ransomware, this is a topic that's been around for a little while, but it continues to be around. And why is that? That's because ransomware continues to be around. We keep talking about ransomware because ransomware keeps being around and it keeps getting worse. It actually is getting exponentially worse here. What we're seeing out there, the ransomware attacks are getting more sophisticated, and the fallouts of the attack are becoming broader and more significant to the company. Let's think back, ransomware, what did it used to be? Basically, it used to be where the employee would get an email, a phishing email like Jeff was talking about. They would click on the link because they didn't know any better. Maybe they didn't get the cyber awareness training like they should have. And it unleashed the ransomware and files got encrypted around your business. And then what everybody did was they looked at the IT guy and said, hey, we have backups, restore from backups. And so they restored from backups and everything was back up and running. They dodged the bullet. If they couldn't get back, if they didn't have the backups working well, then maybe they paid a couple $100 or maybe a couple $1,000 in Bitcoin to the hackers, and they got the data back, and they moved on, right? And they took the lessons learned and moved forward from there. And it was a bad day at the office for the IT guys, right? It's kind of how it was. That's not the way it is anymore. Today, ransomware has evolved into highly sophisticated attacks. It's not just the phishing, although that is still the vast majority, but there's other ways that people are compromising networks besides phishing. And more importantly, it's become more than just holding your company's data hostage for money. It really has become a full-blown, it can become a full-blown existential corporate crisis. All right, and again, more significant than the new ways people are getting in. It's what they're doing once they're inside your network that's become so nefarious. And so right now, what they're doing nowadays is beyond encrypting their data. Okay, so first of all, they are coming into your network and they are staying in your network for a longer time. It used to be they got in, they encrypted your data, and then off you go. So basically 24 hours after they got in, your system was encrypted and the ransomware event was underway. Now they are staying in your network. They're staying in your network for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. They are exploring your entire network. They are trying to figure out where everything is, and they're trying to figure out where the goods are. They are trying to figure out where your backups are, and they're going to when they do encrypt your data, they're going to delete or some other way disable your ability to recover from backups. Most nefarious is this data exfiltration. They are spending the time in their network And in that 30, 60, 90 days, they are figuring out what is your most sensitive data, and they are copying it out of your network. And they're getting a copy of it. And what happens then is that the backups and your ability to recover your data and be operational really isn't the only thing you got to worry about anymore. What they're now doing is they are holding your company's reputation for ransom, because they are saying, even if you have full backups, they are saying, unless you pay me X number of dollars in Bitcoin, I am going to publicly shame you. I am going to post your company's sensitive documents or your client's sensitive documents on the internet for everybody to see, so that they know you got hacked, and that your reputation for being, a trustworthy advisor or somebody, a stalwart, a keeper of the sensitive data, we're going to ruin that reputation. So, I have a couple of examples here of what's out there. This one is Maze. This is the group that sort of pioneered the reputational ransom. And some people may have seen this has been in the news lately. This is what their website looked like. You can see on here a bunch of different companies and organizations that have been compromised. And in some of those cases, on the right-hand side, you see the companies who did not pay the ransom, and all of their data that was exfiltrated is available on the dark web for download. I said this is what their website looked like, if you, for those who are paying attention, because they actually, Maze announced 2 weeks ago that they have actually disbanded. So that's actually an interesting development, that Maze supposedly is disbanded, and the threat from Maze is supposedly gone. But in reality, it's not gone. The people who are in Maze are just, going on and going to create their own ransomware gangs, and now we're just going to have instead of one threat group, we're going to have a bunch of smaller threat groups. So that's one example. Another example is a group called Soda Nakibi, and what they do is they post it online, and not only do they say we'll post your stuff online if you don't pay our ransom, but they do one better, which is we're going to post it actually and put it online for an auction. And you can pay us the ransom, and we'll not release it. But if somebody else pays us more sooner, we'll give it to them instead. So this is Soda Nakibi's auction site for the data that they've exfiltrated. And in here are just a couple examples. You can see this company, and I pulled these off yesterday. These are all the dark web yesterday. NNK Technologies, their source code for some, whatever it is they're whatever they're doing, some firm analytics, that is out there. Starting price is $5,000. If you pay them, you can buy it now for $50,000 and get their source code. Here's another one is Grubman, I guess some law firm that represents MTV. If you want to pay $2 million, or if somebody else wants to pay $2 million, they can get a data of the documents that MTV gave to their lawyers. I have another one on the next slide here. Basically, LeBron James, apparently Grubman law firm represents LeBron James. So again, for $1.5 million, you can get their data, or for $600,000, I guess, is the starting price. And then another group, Sherwood Food and Harvest Distributors. I don't know what they do, but again, their buy it now price is only $200,000. Why is that? Again, I mentioned before, they are in the network, they are doing recon, and they understand the value of the data that they get. So they understood, they probably know what Sherwood Food and Harvest's annual revenue and what their finances are like. So that's why they set the price the way they do. They know what they're going after. On the next slide, I have another example again from Soda Nakibi. These are GPI Gaming, whoever that is, but the next one, Hearts Mountain Industries. They got a copy of Hearts Mountain Industries' cyber insurance policy. So they actually know how much the insurance company will pay in ransom for Hearts Mountain. So they're going to set their ransom demand commensurate with that amount. They're going to get as much as they can out of the insurance company. They already know how much they can get. Again, this is just an example of what they are doing out there in terms of the recon and the level of attention and expertise they're applying to this now. So again, you can see that it's getting more sophisticated. Ransom amounts used to be a few $100s, maybe a few $1,000s. Now they are easily over 100,000, and they routinely get into 2 million. Again, the examples I showed you that I pulled off the dark web yesterday, $2 million for LeBron James, or 1.5 for LeBron James, and 2 million for MTV, right? So here's the thing. It's it's not just about the money. And again, I mentioned there's a reputational impact, okay? But what's happening is that ransomware can be considered, depending on where the business is or where the business operates and what state's laws are applied to that organization. Ransomware can be considered a reportable data breach, which means that if you are subject to a ransomware attack, you must report that to the Attorney General or to some governing organization there with the state. And there are regulations involved with reporting to your users and your customers also. And the thing is, if you don't report to the government organizations, if you don't report to the users, the clients, the people who have been impacted by this, there may be legal ramifications and corporate fines levied by the government. And so what happens is this is now a legal problem. It's not just an IT, backups, keep the systems up and running problem. This becomes a corporate wide problem. You have legal issues, you have publicity and reputational issues, and so now you got to get your legal department involved, your marketing or your public relations has to get involved. Again, it's not just an IT thing. And I think that's the most important thing for everybody to understand is that the entire organization needs to be paying attention to these data breaches. Ransomware is the example I'm using, but any data breach. So what can we do? What can we do? Well, we want to train users not to click on those emails, right? And hopefully with some cybersecurity training, that's been done. But now but it's not 100%. Right, and you get your click rate down from 75% down to, or your click rate from 25% down to 2% click rate. Well, that's great, but for a 1,000 person organization, that's still 20 people clicking on it, and all you need is one. And so the problem is you got to look at it beyond just the training and keeping people from clicking. You still have to prepare for when somebody does click on it, and you just have to think about what do you do from an IT perspective, from your cybersecurity. How do you prepare when somebody does click? And you need to think about, well, what is it that happens? One of the things that really needs to happen in order for these ransomware attacks or any data breach attack to be successful is they need to have lateral movement within the organization. In other words, if a user clicks on it on their laptop, does that allow the ransomware to spread to other systems or around your entire company? And should it? And so you need to think about that. So, things from an IT perspective that you need to do, remove local administrative privileges. If as a user, if they have rights to run, if the account has the privileges to run and have access to all the sensitive parts of the computer, and the computer will go ahead and run these malware, that's not good. So you want to look at removing local administrative privileges and making sure that the user can only do things that they're supposed to be able to do to get their job and nothing more. Other things from an IT perspective you can do are dividing the IT system and control access across segments. Again, that lateral movement. Sure, the person's laptop needs to talk to the accounting laptop needs to talk to the accounting folder, but doesn't need to be able to see the HR folder. Doesn't need to be able to see other workstations. Let's restrict the access and visibility for each workstation into only what it can, so that you can reduce the amount of lateral movement that goes on. Next slide. The other thing that you need to think about is that using software configurations, behavioral-based analysis is now a must-have. Antivirus scanning and scanning for viruses is not good enough. You need to have what we call behavioral analysis tools that are looking at what the person is doing on the computer. Does it make sense that Joe in accounting is logging into the accounting server and then 5 minutes later logging into the HR server and then 5 minutes later logging into the IT server and so on and so forth? Probably not. That's probably not Joe, but it's Joe's hijacked computer with malware running on it. Software restriction policies are another thing, which is to reduce the likelihood that programs can run on a computer. These are all highly technical things, and they may not be, they may sort of, not make sense to everybody, but these are things you can ask your IT department, right? DNS filtering, domain name service filtering. Again, some people here on the webinar may not understand it, but if you ask your IT department, they should know what it is. And if the IT department doesn't know what DNS filtering is, then have them call us, right? And we'll help them out. But these are the kinds of tools and technologies that people need to be thinking about implementing, because cybersecurity training, while useful, is not going to be 100%. So I think we got some polling questions that Jared's prepared for us here.
Great, thanks, David. We've got the second polling question up here. Again, if you are attending the webinar for CPE credit, you do need to answer the polling question. So this is the second of the three that we've got going on here. Again, keep it open for a few seconds here to give everyone enough time to log their responses. Just another few seconds here, and then we'll pass things off to Heather. Great, thank you, everyone. Now on to Heather.
Excellent. Thank you, Jeff, David, and Jared, and welcome everybody. I'm going to move on to the Internet of Things and talk about something that really affects not only your professional life, but certainly your personal life as well. If we could just move to the first slide, that would be great. So this is an old slide. It's back in 2014, there was nearly 2 billion connected devices. And the estimate was that it'd be 8 billion devices by the year 2020. Well, here we are, pandemic hit, and the number is actually upwards of 31 billion IoT devices that are being connected right now. So that affects a lot of things in your life, from a professional standpoint, from a personal standpoint. We're going to talk about our home. We're going to think about transportation, our body, which is our healthcare information, infrastructure as buildings, the office buildings that you hopefully are going to be returning to soon or have returned to in a little bit, even if it's a hybrid manner, and then also cities overall as a common category. Next slide, please. It's not only the fact that these devices make our lives so easy, and I think that's a huge standpoint that people just take advantage of, is that we do these things because it just makes ease of use. There is a huge revenue opportunity behind it, which is what is really drawing all of our large businesses to become more creative and inventive and make our life easier and all of those sorts of things. But the revenue behind it is extraordinarily large. The global spending during 2020, the estimate is close to 1.3 trillion. Again, this is what it was estimated at in 2014, and is far exceeded that number. So next slide, please. It was back then estimated to be just under $1 trillion, but again, they're taking advantage of everything from healthcare to baby monitors to our washing machines to pacemakers to everything. It is a big business, and people don't understand that the security and the information that they're presenting and putting out there between microphones and listening devices and all of those sorts of things is really people just trying to make money off of individuals. It does help and aid in our everyday life, but at the same time, the whole thing is a business opportunity. Next slide. So how do they do this, right? So there's sensors, how we connect, and then our just day-to-day people and processes that we have. It's all come full circle as far as what Jeff and David had said. All of that factors into all of the Internet of Things and how people are getting a reach and insight into not only our lives, but our businesses as well. You think about in a boardroom and how many people have their phones for different applications turned on as far as microphones are concerned. Are they listening to big business deals? Is someone interceding that information? You need to think about all of those sorts of things as well, as far as how we are protecting ourselves and what information we're making available about ourselves. I think on a day-to-day basis about my Alexa, what information that's hearing and what it's storing. And a lot of people actually have those turned on to ensure that the Alexa is hearing the information that's going on inside the household for such simple things as shopping lists or things of that nature. But that's not all that it's hearing. Next slide. So as far as sensors are concerned, there's a million of different things as far as what you think about. So again, it's our face recognition on our iPhones. It's us being able to control the temperature, the heat, the air conditioning within our houses. It's us being able to turn our washing machines on and turn our dryers on. It's regulating our water temperatures. It is allowing us to understand if there's links. We get so many different triggers as far as if there's a water link in the basement, or in a data center, at one of the data centers that are storing all of our information. All of that is actually listening and storing that information. Just because it makes life simplistic and it allows us to understand what is going on, that information is stored and can be captured, just like David was speaking about as far as ransomware is concerned, and that Jeff was speaking about as far as ensuring that data transmittal is protected and your passwords are strong and all of those things. This information is in that same boat. It's all being taken into account as far as people can easily attain it. And so it's stuff that we do on a day-to-day basis by a click of a button, but we are actually really thinking about what actually is going on. Next slide, please. So even just our connectivity, between Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, between scanning even our grocery cards. So as far as if you have a card that you go to your grocery store and you shop about, this is an easy thing. People can intercept that information and understand your shopping habits. So then, to David's point, they can create an email, send it to you, looks like it's, yeah, those are the things that I buy all the time. You click that link, and again, potentially ransomware is created, and your information is stored, or you do it via your work computer, and they get access to your company information and they lock that down. We don't even think about it because we're just thinking about our ease of use, right? So every time you scan something, every time you turn on your Bluetooth, and I was thinking about the other day, my kids were asking about playing a certain song and connecting it in the car. And I was thinking about how people are taking advantage of, the music trends that I listen to, or my shopping habits, or things of that nature. And those are easily crafted emails that can take advantage of yourself or your organization or anything that they actually have access to. You also have to think about where you're being connected to. The easy thing obviously is always about, the easy example is Starbucks, right? So people jump on Starbucks Wi-Fi, they work there, especially now trying to get out of the house in any way, shape, or form that people can for just a quick breather. It's not a productive network. And you have to think about the information that's being transmitted, not only from your laptop, but from your phone being connected as well. Okay, next slide, please. The other thing is that people are living longer, right? So one of the big areas is that, we used to have people living in assisted living and they would have pull cords. Now they have a million different sensors throughout their home and their living environment. People monitor them, again, sleep patterns with watches that people have, or apps, or anything of that nature. You can monitor down to the level of how well you slept last night, and you have no insight into it yourself even. Think about people intercepting that. So it is a huge benefit while we want to know that we're still taking care of, our elderly individuals as far as in our family, our friends, and things of that nature. But every single aspect of your life can be tracked. Think about if you have a pacemaker, that can easily be hacked into as well. If you have someone with diabetes, your insulin pumps, those can be hacked into. So it's a very, very real threat. I was thinking when Trump went to Walter Reed, if he had any medical devices inside him, or the information that was going to be taken about him, I was fully expecting something to come out of that. That would be shared, obviously, that someone would hack into. But the Internet of Things is a wonderful thing because it allows us all of this insight, but at the same time, it's very scary to understand the fact that people have that much information down to our sleeping habits about us. So you think about it just from your personal world, but you also have to think about it from a professional standpoint too, and the information that's going across your work phones and what they're understanding. So one of my clients is a manufacturer of insulin pumps, and they're actually getting, an FDA approval for all sorts of other medications, and it will be regulated through, technology to distribute the medication as needed and when needed, and the dose that is actually needed. So if you think about yourself or loved ones or people who are high up in your organization that maybe have something similar to that for all sorts of illnesses or ailments, and someone hacks into that and be able to deliver a higher dose or no dose of that medication, it's certainly a very scary thing to think about. So those are the sorts of things that you need to ensure as far as the security that you set up around those devices. Again, Jeff talked to it as far as passwords are concerned, security questions, making sure that nothing that's easily attainable, that we all love putting information out there about ourselves. And then also the networks that we're connecting to. And I think that's a big thing. And, David talked about it a little bit as well, is that when we're connecting from home, we need to make sure that we're in a secure connection because everything is being transported over. And that's like every single device in your house. You need to make sure that your home network is set up securely so that that information isn't happening. Thank you for that. As far as our devices are at our security, financial information, I'm sure all of us are doing, all of online banking, are paying our bills, all of those sorts of things. All of that hopefully is not being transmitted unencrypted. I think the transition happened very quickly as far as COVID was concerned, and many of my clients, both individuals and companies, were only worried about keeping the business up and running, but not actually understanding what they need to put in place as far as secure firewalls are concerned and the protections that they needed to. So it's been a long transition, but they also, all these devices are making our organizations more vulnerable as well. And it's just our day-to-day things that people aren't even thinking about at all. The other thing is that all of the discussion as far as all of our social media apps, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, the discussions that are going on there, and they're listening to everything that we're saying. So I'm sure that many of you are on all these applications and find it weird that, you were just having a conversation with a friend about something you're going to buy your kid or relative for Christmas, and then all of a sudden the ads start popping up about it, or where you want to go on vacation, because we all want to go on vacation right now, no doubt, but we can't. And, ads pop up for that destination as well. That's not a mistake. Your phone's listening, the microphones are not shut off. All of these things are very much connected. So we need to be very concerned and very cautious of, what we're doing and making sure that we do shut down a lot of our security, especially in this era right now as far as remote working is concerned. We need to make sure any business discussions that we're having, secrets aren't being leaked, that people aren't listening, all of those sorts of things. So it's very tight and it's very sensitive, especially now, because when we're in the office, we'd have the face-to-face discussions, and it wouldn't be over Zoom, it wouldn't be over a GoToMeeting, it would be face-to-face, and sometimes we wouldn't even bring our phones into those meetings. Next slide, please. So as far as, popular connected devices that are already out there, and this is just obviously very, very, very baseline. I'm sure many of you had heard about the Jeep hack, the infamous Jeep hack from many years ago. And also obviously in Massachusetts, question one, as far as cars are concerned, everything is becoming computerized. They know everything that's going on. Many years ago with the Jeep hack, there was two guys that were very insistent upon in more securing the fact that computerized cars. They had started testing the devices, that sort of thing, and they hired someone out of the blue that they knew but wasn't letting on to what they were actually doing. He was driving down the road in the Jeep. All of a sudden, the other two started blaring the radio, windshield wipers going, lights flashing, and then all of a sudden they cut the brakes. He was on the highway, and they were able to control all of that remotely. So you think about your car, you think about traveling on the airplane, all of those sorts of things. Those are threats that we have to think about and vulnerabilities moving forward into the future. This was many years ago as well, and this was not, the technology has increased significantly since then. I think about my own children as far as watches are concerned. To GPS trackers, not only in your phone, in watches and everything. that people buy into. They know every single movement, every single place that you are. People are very much targets that they can hack into some of those devices and understand, okay, if we're going to target this person as far as kidnappings are concerned, or even just, security threats. I think about that from a mother's standpoint too, saying, I want to know where my kids are, but at the same time, do I want anyone else to know where my kids are? And what is the level of security that I can put upon that? So they are great. I mean, they do monitor obviously your heart rates and calorie expenditure and all of those sorts of things, but you have to think, okay, that's another exposure for myself or my child or my CEO, my CFO, anyone in my organization, that people will know exactly where they are. All right, next slide, please. Even down to transportation, right? So forget about the watches. Think about in your cars, the GPS unit. They not only can tell where you are, but they can tell you where you want to go and where you should go to find something such as easy as parking spots. It's just another example as far as how far this information can go. So you may say, all right, this person's in San Francisco, we can find them, but you can also hack into the technology to understand where they're being suggested to park and where you could meet them. So all of those things are just examples of how far this technology has gone. And we all really need to make sure that we're securing that information. Next slide. So while the Internet of Things is a wonderful opportunity for us to simplify our life, gain information, track our children, track our elderly, track our own selves as far as from a health perspective, there absolutely is an underlying security component to it that we really need to make sure that we're thinking of when we provide this information out there as far as technology is concerned. We need to do a number of things. As I said, we want to make sure that anything as far as passwords are concerned for any of these devices are extremely secure. Jeff gave you the guidelines earlier. Anything that is not needed to be shared from a microphone standpoint or from a camera perspective standpoint or GPS location allocation standpoint, all of those things need to be shut off. We need to make sure as far as the privacy is concerned, we need to make sure that we don't fail to protect private information that's stored on the device. We need to make sure that we're not connecting to insecure networks as well. So that's an easy way to ensure that our information is being sent across insecure networks. We need to make sure we protect that. And we also need to make sure that as far as the information that we are publicly making available is information that's not relevant and private and confidential. So we need to be very understanding as far as what information we're making publicly available and understand all the devices in your house are listening, and that information can absolutely be hacked and shared. So be aware of what you're connected to and the information that is being provided against it. I think as far as the cars are concerned, one of my biggest concerns is seeing a self-driving car, driving through a parking garage and me standing there and thinking about how much do I trust this technology, right? Did someone hack into that? Is the car going to go off the road? Is it going to come into me or my children or something of that nature? So while it gives us this great ability to do so many things and share so much information, the message is be aware of what it is, make sure that it's secure, and take advantage of it, but know what you're putting out there and the vulnerabilities and risks that are associated with it. Thank you, and I thought we'd leave a few minutes for questions.
Great, thanks, Heather. We've got our last polling question here. Again, if you are attending for CPE, you do need to answer the polling question. So this is the last one here, and then we'll get to some of the questions that everyone submitted throughout the webinar. Great, thanks. Jeff, I think you've been keeping track of some questions that have been coming in, so I'll pass it over to you.
I have, and so I figured that I'd distribute these questions to our expert panel, and I think David, the first question's for you. What are your thoughts on SSO or single sign-on? Is there a concern that a phishing attack could compromise more systems because they're all linked together with a single password?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a concern. You know, single sign-on with the cloud movement, everything's in these disparate environments, and so single sign-on is very popular because it allows you to have one username and password and get into multiple systems as opposed to multiple accounts. If you're going to put all your eggs in one basket, you got to be careful with that basket, right? So single sign-on is definitely a concern, but you got to protect that basket. You got to protect it well. So one of the things that you mentioned, Jeff, is multi-factor authentication. That's the whole reason why multi-factor authentication is so important, because with multi-factor authentication, just because somebody phishes the username and password from you, that's not good enough. That won't allow them to get in. Multi-factor authentication requires them to not only get the something you know, username and password, but get the something you have, which is that physical device, that physical key fob, the RSA token, or your cell phone, or whatever else. And that's not something they can get over the internet. So that's why multi-factor authentication is one of the critical pieces towards protecting against phishing attacks.
So David, are you suggesting that you can introduce single sign-on, but introduce it with multi-factor authentication as well?
I mean, most definitely. I mean, realistically speaking, any type of authentication you introduce these days should have multi-factor authentication. We're working with clients who are looking to deploy some pretty big applications to their enterprise, and industry leaders that are cloud-based but don't have multi-factor authentication as a capability. And we kind of told these clients, look, you're going to take your data and put it in somebody else's cloud, and they're not going to provide you the protection that you need. You really need to think about this again. And we've had clients who've changed their minds based off of that, which they should have.
Thank you. Although not a topic that you discussed, Heather, but I know you and I have had discussions about the teleworker, and one of the questions we have is how can you confirm or enforce employees' home internet security? Any thoughts on that?
I mean, certainly a couple of different thoughts on that. One, I think the biggest thing that individual or employees working from home do not think about is information that they're actually printing or faxing or scanning. The home network isn't necessarily always insanely secure, and I don't think that individuals are utilizing their secure VPN connection enough. We've had a number of individuals or clients that have had issues, and it really boils down to that. So, information that you're storing on either your desktop or printing or scanning, that information is typically unencrypted or very visible. So ensuring that you're using strong security practices and utilizing your organization's VPN and storing things only on secure networks is certainly, a very strong suggestion for everyone, and that they need to keep in mind. And thinking about also what you're keeping on your phone, because again, your phone connects to your wireless network as well, so things in your inbox could potentially be easily visible as well.
Thank you, Heather. David, question for you. During your presentation, you mentioned something about behavioral analysis tools, right, as a replacement for traditional virus protection. Can you, give us some examples or any thoughts on that in the next 30 seconds or so?
Sure. And yeah, so behavioral analytics tools, not necessarily as a replacement, but in addition to traditional antivirus. So basically, programs that you have on the computer, similar to the antivirus, but instead of simply looking at software that's on the computer to see if it's a virus or not, which is what an antivirus does, this software is actually paying more attention to what is happening on the computer. What is the user doing? Is the user logging into a system they shouldn't? You create basically a behavioral profile. Simple examples are you have a server and it's the VPN server. I'll just make up the example of that where people can log in. You have an administrative assistant that reliably works 9 to 5 for years, but then all of a sudden Saturday 2 a.m. they log in. Is that really this person logging in, or is it more likely a hacker who phished their credentials and is logging in at 2 a.m. on a Saturday? It's just so out of the profile, so out of the behavioral profile of how that person normally operates that it definitely does need to be flagged. So those are the kinds of things that these behavioral analytic tools are looking for. They're seeing what's happening on the computers. They're seeing how it's being used and what's being done on them.
So do you have the name? Do you have the name of? And we're not promoting any software product, but do you have the name of any tools that you're most familiar with?
Yeah, I mean, there's ones like Carbon Black or Sentinel One or another group called Adlumin. There's a handful of them out there that do this type of work.
Sounds good. Well, we've hit that witching hour, so I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Hopefully it was helpful and insightful, and I want to thank both Heather and David. They're great resources to all of you. And if you ever have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to have a discussion. Thanks again.